Good morning. It's Sunday. Let's look at a final Big Wagh tier list for 3rd edition. But first, I'd like to say thank you to my patrons. Panda, Sprawley, Von, Tome, Christian Lenz, and Zen Ramirez. I'm on a bit of a tear trying to get 10 patrons before 4th edition. And if you're going to buy some dice, you might as well use Random Dice. Buy dice and random dice, you might as well use code MDG at checkout to support the channel. And as always, thanks to Librarian for the art. Oof. Okay. Purple screen, not a good start. So here we have a Big Wagh tier list, so just to sort of put everything into context, this is only orc units, so I'm not using allies or regiments of renown or anything like that, or mercenaries. I am including, basically it's everything that's on the list, right? On Wahapedia, everything that is in the Orc War Clans faction. So just to define my ranking systems, so we start off on S tier, and S tier is an auto-include in Big Wagh. It means that if you don't have it in Big Wagh, then you're probably doing something wrong. A really good example of this would be a War Chanter. He generates Wagh points, and a lot of Big Wagh lists tend to be Ironjaw heavy, so if you don't have a War Chanter in your Big Wagh list, even at 1,000 points, I'm not sure what's going on. A tier is for units that are really good, and if you see them in a list, there's no surprise, there's no shock. But they're not necessarily auto-includes in every list, so a good example might be Brutes. You'll see Big Wagh lists that don't run Brutes, and they're totally fine. But if you do see Brutes, you're not like, I wonder why there's Brutes in there. Like, they're a staple, but they're not quite an auto-include. B is situational, so these are units where under certain conditions, like if your list is leaning a certain way, they become good and viable, or if the local meta is leaning a certain way, they become good and viable. A good example, I think, is the Cruel Boys Killbow. This unit is very good in a monster-heavy meta. In fact, if you're playing and there's usually always at least one monster, but often 2 monsters on the table in your meta. If there's a lot of Gargant players, Thunder Lizard players, Stonehorn, Ogre players, whatever it's called, Iceborne, whatever they're called, the Frost Tusks. There's so many words in this game. But if that's the case, it's like, well, then probably running a couple Killbows is going to be really good. But if there's no monsters, they're kind of not very good. So again, they're conditionally good, situationally good. And then F tier is these are units where if you replaced them with anything that wasn't in the F tier, that your list would be better. That there's not really a reason that you would ever want to run this unit. They're kind of just F tier, right? They're kind of just trash. A good example, in my opinion, is the Rekkas. Rekkas are F tier because they're more expensive than Raiders, right? And they don't fill any role as well as either Ragers do or Ardboys do. And if you're like, oh, they're a screen, it's like, well, you can get Stabbas for the same point cost. You can get Hobgrots for cheaper. So again, the idea is that, like, for 120 points, you're better off with almost any other unit. There's not really a reason that you would want to run this unit in particular over other units. It doesn't feel it's not the best hammer, it's not the best anvil, it's not the best screen, right? It's not really doing much of anything, and you would be better served to pick the right tool for the job. This is something that I'm looking forward to in 4th edition. Everyone is saying, and even GW themselves are saying, that they're leaning more into like a battlefield role approach to units, where it's like, well, these guys are anti-cavalry, and they have, rules that explicitly that sort of state that, because that's how I play the game. That's how I think about lists. That's how I build. That's how I deploy. It's like, what's each piece's role, and how is it going to best fill that role, and what roles in my army do I feel like I need, right? Like, anyway, let's get started. So first we have a Mega Boss on Maw-Krusha. I'm going to stick the Maw-Krusha in A tier. You can definitely run a Maw-Krusha in a Big Wagh list with Vasta and Destroyer. He's probably not going to be your general, although I think we did see some in the May list, winning lists. But yeah, really strong, really good, packs a punch, still lots of fun, tons of movement shenanigans, wonderful model, big fan. Up next, we have Gordrak, the Fist of Gork. And I'm going to stick Gordrak in B tier. And the reason he's in B tier is, again, because there's a condition. I think that Gordrak is actually good and playable if you're trying to run a 2 Maw Crusher list. You can do that in Big Wagh. You can basically just take a 2 Maw Crusher Iron Jaw list and just put it into Big Wagh, and all you need to do is change out a Wargog Prophet, and all of a sudden your army is actually significantly better. You get to keep Mighty Destroyers, right? A really good rule from Iron Jaws. Maybe not the best one. I'm surprised that Iron Jaws don't do as well. Like, I just like their rules. It's their War Scrolls I feel are kind of old. Anyway, so if you're running a 2 Maw Crusher list, then I think that he's actually really good, you know? It's actually really good. Let's get the screen nice and big. That's better. Up next, we have Gobsprak. In Big Wagh this season, right now, in 3rd edition, at the end of this GHB, I still think Gobsprak is S tier. I made a video called, like, what happened to Gobsprak. We just saw a bunch of lists and people weren't really running him. But 240 point, 14-inch flying monster, that's 2 casts with an excellent spell lore who happens to know the whole spell lore. Like, Gobsprak for his point value right now, I think even if we weren't in the season of Primal Dice and everything, I still think Gobsprak would be very good and worth playing. You forget too that his once per game 3d6 unbind is going to trigger his ability to deal d6 mortal wounds to enemies, and it's scary. Psychologically, it's just terrifying. Kill boss on Corpse Ripavulcha, I almost want to put him F tier. In fact, I think he's probably F tier. The reason I say that is because, like, what's he at now? I believe that he's at 190, if I'm not mistaken, for his points. Kill boss and Corpse Ripavulcha. And for his points, we have to think about what exactly he's doing in the army. Is he a hammer? Not really. Is he bringing utility to the army? Not particularly. Commanding view is not very strong, and all part of the plan is also not particularly strong in Big Wagh because, again, we tend to be running a lot of brutes and ard boys and not a lot of gut rippas. You know, he's fast. He's not particularly fighty. You know, the difference between him and Gobsprak is the difference between, like, the Swamp Kala Shaman's little staff and the kill boss's sticka, which is not a huge difference in damage. You know, the bird itself is the thing that, you know, if it's going to do some damage, that's the part that's going to do the damage. So it just, to me, feels it would just be better every time as something else. For 190 points, I would rather it be a big pig. And I can't think of a role. It's not a hammer, it's not an anvil, it's a flanker, but it's more expensive and worse than a gouger. Or it's worse than just a unit of gruntas, and it takes up a hero slot. So I can't imagine a world where you actually play a Corpse Ripavulcha in a Big Wagh list and it's optimized. I hate to say it, I just can't see it. I can't see a list where you'd be like, oh yeah, Corpse Ripavulcha's sick in this list. It's really too bad because I really like the model, and I just like fast flying guys, and I think in Cruel Boys, I think you can probably make a go of a Corpse Ripavulcha, of a Vulture boss. I think you can, but I don't think you can do it in Big Wagh, unfortunately. Swamp Boss Scumdrak and Snatch a Boss on Sludgeraker Beast. I'm going to stick them both in B tier. I'm kind of torn between B tier and A tier because...
Gigi, I've decided not to leave this town.
Oops.
Maybe I can stay.
I gotta make sure that that's not the case. Sorry, I'm just having some shuffle playlist, loop playlist. I wonder why it does that. Sure, it's fine. Snatch a Boss on Sludgeraker Beast, Swamp Boss Scumdrak. Now, the reason that I'm kind of torn between B tier and A tier is because I feel like they're actually really good. They're quite powerful fighty monsters. They have that nice 3-inch reach, which is great for fighting over units. They do buff Cruel Boys, but here's where we start getting into that B tier, is where if you happen to be playing like some Bull Boys, like a reinforced unit of Bull Boys in a Big Wagh list, I think they get significantly better. If you're trying to go for that minimum size list of battleline points, right? Minimum number of battleline points, which is Gut Rippas and Hobgrots. And then I think it's significantly better. you know? So I'm kind of stuck between that A tier and that B tier. I'm really torn here. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Do you think that Snatch Boss in a Big Wah list is A tier, or is he situational? I'm gonna kind of stick with my first thought and stick them both down in B tier. And I think they're fairly comparable in Big Wah. You're probably not gonna give them an artifact, right? You're looking for a Destroyer, you're looking for glowing tattoos. But if you do, Mork's Eye Pebble would be good, right? They can take Fasten. So you know what? I think we're gonna put the Snatcher Boss in A tier and the Scumdrek in B tier, just because Snatcher Boss can actually take those enhancements, which makes him pretty good. Kragnos, the End of Empires. I think just straight up F tier. I can't think of an army list where you'd be like, well, he's actually like really good in this list. I think he's, for 700 points, he's just always served as something better. I made a video about this, comparing Kragnos to like a Gargant and to a Maw Crusher, and the Maw Crusher wins out every time just because of how much utility he gives to the army as a whole, right? You're not just looking for like the one big 3d6 charge and the big smashy monster. You have that big smashy monster, and you know, he's also giving triple commands. He's doing, you know, other things as well. Issuing Mighty Destroyers 3 times is really powerful. So I think he's just straight up F tier. I think you're better off running pretty much anything else. Let's get into the big pigs. So our Tusk Boss, I think Tusk Boss is going to be B tier. Again, the only time I think that he's really good is if you're like, well, I have a bunch of big pigs and I'm definitely going to play them, right? So then he's kind of B tier. Let's look at the Hacking Crew. I think we're still in that B tier. I don't think he's super particularly strong in Big Wah, which is unfortunate because I love the ability, like being able to build up momentum and then charge and use his monstrous action to jump over the enemy and get into their backline. I feel is really, really strong. So maybe it's just his point cost. However, the Grunta Gouger, I think, is A tier. I think that for what he's trying to be, like a sideline flanker, I think it's really strong. He's a monster, so he'll grab objectives. The Strike Last monstrous action that he has is really good in Big Wah. It's not as good in Iron Jaws because you have Smashin' and Bashin', but in Big Wah, giving Strike Last to something off on the flank is actually kind of nice. And he can come in and do it on another unit in the middle if need be, right? And he doesn't really degrade, so he's got 12 wounds on a 4-up save, but if he's taking 10 damage, he's still doing exactly the thing he did before. So he's able to actually kind of like stick around and be useful over multiple turns, which is nice. Oh boy. Mega Boss on foot. I want to put him in S tier. Like, that's my own, how I view him, just because of the utility that he brings. Whenever I have a Big Wah list that doesn't have some Mega Boss, I feel like I'm missing out. I feel like the command point economy just kind of sucks, especially when I have like, you know, 2 units of Ard Boys in the front, being able to run them both forwards, 6, or being able to redeploy them both backwards, or being able to all-out defense them both, to me, is really strong. And that's where he ends up being the most useful, is when he's sort of commanding those foot troops out in the front. Phenomenally strong. Phenomenally strong. So I'm sort of borderline S tier. For me, he's S tier. My Big Wah lists always run the same 6 heroes because I just feel like they're the best 6 heroes to run, and that's the end of it, right? So, but I'll stick him at A tier because there's definitely some wiggle room, and I don't think he is an auto-include in every Big Wah list. If I don't see him, then it's like, well, you know, but I can see why people don't run him. As opposed to the Wurgog Prophet. The Wurgog Prophet, of course, is S tier because he helps generate wall points, and his Wurgog mask is terrifying. Need I say more? Without glowing tattoos, I think he knocks down a peg, but with his 4-up ward, like he's gonna be there. He's the reason why Fix and Beat I take on the one War Chanter, because he's primarily gonna, you know, make sure he's always within range of that Wurgog Prophet to heal him up. It's quite powerful, you know, like you're gonna Wurgog mask something, and then after he's taken, you know, let's say 5 or 6 damage, you're like, well, okay, so I'm gonna try to Fix and Beat 3-up, good, and then I'm gonna try to Heroic Recovery him, you know, roll an 8 or under on 2d6, good, you know, I'm gonna heal him 2d3, and boom, he's gonna be back in the game for the next round. Yeah, very, very, very strong. We don't need to talk about how strong he is because we all know how strong he is. Zogrok, the Anvil Smasher. My first thought is to put him in F tier. For a 150 point hero, when is he really good? We've done the math before and sat down and crunched the numbers, and he can actually, you know, give some, like, a relatively good damage buff to a reinforced unit of Gore-Gruntas, but you kind of need to get into that high volume of dice before he starts to be good. So like 6 Gore-Gruntas are going to throw a lot of dice, so being able to do that I think is good. We'll see what he's like in 4th edition, but for now I just can't imagine that he's good. I think that a War Chanter is just always better, and given in Big Wad that you are really limited, we're really struggling over our last hero slot or 2. I think that there's no reason that you would ever take a Zogrok when you could just save 30 points and have a better unit in the form of a War Chanter, right? So I think he's just strictly going to be F tier. And I think the Ardboy boss, is the Ardboy boss a B tier, not an F tier? The thing with the Ardboy boss is that I can understand his utility because of the 5-up ward that he, or sorry, the 5-up rally that he gives to the Ardboys. If you have a reinforced brick of Ardboys are good in Big Wah, so if you have a reinforced brick of them, and your plan is like, yeah, you know, like, I have Stickas, so they're going to charge me, and I want them to charge me, and then after I get stuck in combat, if I lose a whole bunch of guys, I'm just going to, you know, retreat back, and then I'm going to rally and bring back a bunch of boys, and that's sort of my game plan. I think you can sort of have a go of it, but I think without, like, at least one reinforced unit of Ardboys, or multiple unit of Ardboys, like 3, I kind of think he falls off and doesn't really do anything, so I'm sticking him in B tier, but he's pretty close to being F tier. Swamp Kala Shaman is up next. Swamp Kala Shaman's going to be S tier for me. I think that he is easily the best Cruel Boy general to have, and Cruel Boys make better generals than Iron Jaws right now at the end of 3rd, so for me he's a solid S tier. Shaman of the Chilled Lands, right? He's casting Blizzard, he's casting Hoarfrost when the Wurgog is staring. He is very good, very strong, very easy to include in your list. Break-a-Boss, I don't know about the Break-a-Boss. See, I'm getting into this weird position now where I kind of feel like if you run a Break-a-Boss in your list, he would just be better off as a different unit, but he's just so good. So, you know, I think I'll stick him in B tier. I think that if you're trying to lean more into like a Cruel Boys, Big Wah, I think with Super Sneaky, and if you give him Fasten, I think that trick, you know, of being Super Sneaky Fasten is strong. But you're playing Big Wah, so you're not a 2-drop. So your opponent is probably going to make you go first, but you have to Super Sneaky beforehand. I don't know. Is the Break-a-Boss ever worth taking? Like, by my own metrics, could he be the last hero? He could be the last hero. Yeah, I'll leave him at a B tier. Same thing with the Merc Knob. I think Merc Knob B tier. I think he can be your last hero if your meta has just a ton of really annoying spells, like AoE spells that are being cast on you. Because from what I understand, if I remember this correctly, Merknob with Belchaban, I'm just going to read the ability really quick. Whenever a friendly Cruel Boys Auric unit wholly within 12, never mind, he's F tier. Because it's Cruel Boy Orcs. It's not just Orcs. So, like, your War Chanters, your Wurgog Prophets, your Mega Bosses, right? They don't get the benefit of this Belchabana, right? And if it's like, well, I have some Iron Jaws heroes and Bone Splitter heroes that are really good, and I'm bringing this unit to help protect them. Oh, wait, no, I can't. Like, well, he's going to be better off. Even though he's cheap, he's going to be better off with any other unit. Weird Knob. I think Weird Knob is actually S tier. I think he's actually S tier. This, oh, geez. I think he's actually S tier this season. My argument really simply is Hand of Gork is an S tier spell, right? Like being able to teleport your things to other places on the map is so good that he's an auto include in every army. You can see why Big Y has a hard time with heroes, because look at all these S tier heroes, right? We have so many. And that's part of the reason why Big Wagh is actually good, right? It's like, oh no, I can't decide on which of all my really good heroes to take. Well, that's a good problem to have. That's a good problem to have. Up next, we got Kill Boss on Gnashtooth. I'm kind of feeling like... I'm kind of torn here between A and B. I'm going to stick him in A because he's just so cheap, 110 points. You know, he can actually make a pretty decent general. You can give him Fasten, and he's probably my next pick for general, but definitely not beating out Swampkala. Gobsprat could actually be decent. So, yeah, I mean, he's just a pretty good value for his points. He's a Cruel Boy race to the bottom. Perfect example, right? Shout out to Aaron with his 6 Gnashtooth list. Just ridiculous. Up next, let's go with the Kill Boss on foot. F tier. He's not even very good in Cruel Boys. You know? All part of the plan is not a particularly good ability. And, I mean, what more is there really to say? If you're running like multiple units of Gut Rippas, or if you're running reinforced units of Gut Rippas, I feel like you're missing out because our boys are just so much better. So just don't run them. Same thing with Manok to Cunning. Please do not run Manok to Cunning in Big Wagh. I mean, he doesn't do a particularly good job at fighting or anything like that. And you have to remember that his abilities that he actually has on his War Scroll aren't relevant in Big Wagh at all, because don't forget, one of them is when after you pick a dirty trick, roll a die, and add one if the unit is your general, so right, and then you get extra dirty tricks. It's like, well, that's not good, you know, like that's not very good. So please don't take Manok to Cunning. Dagox Stab Lads, however, I think B tier. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to say Dagox Stab Lads are going to come in at B tier only because they can fit in your list if you have 70 extra points. If you have 70 extra points, that's the condition that makes them good. They are one of the only things in the book that are that low in points. Nothing really comes to mind. Kill Boss with Stab Grot, I think, is he's 80 points. So Dagox is in a sort of a realm all on his own at that 70 point range. So, I mean, that has value, right? Gore Gruntas. I think Gore Gruntas are going to be S tier in Big Wagh. If you're not playing a unit of, at least one unit of Gore Gruntas in Big Wagh, you're definitely missing out. That, like, Hoarfrost, Violent Fury, Hand of Gork, Mighty Destroyer, Pig Missile is terrifying and a very useful, damaging, sort of get anywhere I need to get to tool for the army. One thing that I regret in 3rd edition is not playing multiple lists that have multiple units of 3 pigs. You know, buff up Hoarfrost, Teleport, Mighty Destroyer, Charge. It's very, very strong, and you could play, you know, a style where it's like, yeah, so, you know, my Ard boys and my castle's sort of going to move up and try to take objectives, but really every turn what I'm trying to do is teleport a unit of pigs somewhere on the map and crash them in. And you'll get your value, you know, you'll get your trade value. Hopefully you'll get some charge bonuses off to ramp up some extra Big Wagh points, but Bolt Boys, I think Bolt Boys are A tier. You don't see them very often right now, but given that a Swampkala Shaman might very well be your general every single time, you know, like you could run a reinforced unit of Bolt Boys. We struggle on points, you know, so this is one of those situations where it's like, well, I have a Swampkala Shaman as a general, and I'm going to play Gobsprat, and I really want to play a reinforced unit of Bolt Boys. I think it's going to be really good in my meta. You know, there's lots of, like, whatever kind of armies, you know, that I want to just shoot down. So now I'm struggling for points, so I'm going to do, like, the minimum battle line requirement, which is 1 Gut Rippas, 1 Hobgrots, 1 unit of Brutes. And now I'm leaning in sort of into that Cruel Boy section, so, you know, why not? My 6th hero is going to be a Sludge Raker. You know, and he's going to sort of stand behind the Gut Rippas, and the Bolt Boys are going to hang out beside him, and the Swampkala Shaman's going to be there, and I just need to make sure that I'm going to be able to achieve Super Sneaky, right? And then, you know, like, you can make a go of that. Like, you can make a good list with that. So, again, I just think that they're good. They're very good range damage output. They're pointed really aggressively. I'm a big fan. As opposed to this next model, Swamp or Marsh Crawler Slogoth, you, my friend, get an F tier ranking. There is nothing that you do that is worth your 170 points. Anything that I could take instead of you is better. Just think about this difference. For 10 fewer points, you could take a Gouger. Great. Gouger's not a hero, right? So you could just take a Gouger. Yep. Gutrippas, we're going to stick in B tier, and just for the simple reason that they're good on the condition that you really want to minimize your battle line point requirement. So that's the only reason. They're not hammers, they're not anvils, they're sort of nothing. They just need, they're worse Ardboys, right? There's no reason that you'd want to take out Rippas again, unless you're trying to hit that minimum battle line requirement. And that's kind of the only condition. As opposed to these little gems, I think Hobgrots are actually A tier. They are very good screens. For 80 points, they do a really good job. I'm a big fan. They're 10 feet on objectives, which is great. They can run and throw their scrap grenades, which means, you know, they're... The thing that's deceiving about the grenades is that you're not going to be throwing these grenades at any kind of big or tanky monster or any kind of, really powerful units. What you're primarily going to be throwing these grenades at, or at least what the intention is some other flanker that your opponent has that is off on the flank where these Hobgrots are, and they're probably not going to have a very, big save. So if you have 10 models, and they have 1 attack each, and they're 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and 1 damage, against a 4-up save, you're gonna ping them for like 2 or 3 points of damage, right? And that can matter, Probably not gonna all-out attack them, right? But yeah, I mean, like, they're good. They're, like I said, they're just good screens, and their ability to run and shoot sort of fits with what they're trying to do, right? It fits with the role that they play. So I'm a big fan. Cruel Boys Monster Killers, I'm kind of torn with Cruel Boys Monster Killers, to be honest, because I just think that they're bringing so much value to the table, Between them, they're 8 models, and they have, on average, what do they have, 2 wounds each? I can't remember. I think they do have 2 wounds each. So it's a lot of wounds, They're on a 5-up save, which isn't great, but then their ability to deal with monsters is quite effective. So I don't know if I want to put them in B tier, like, oh, they're B tier if there's lots of monsters in your meta, but I don't know. They're 130 points, like they're better than Gutrippas for sure. They actually have some rend, lol. Yeah, they're just so much better than Gutrippas. 3 attacks, 4s and 3s, 1 rend, 1 damage. Yeah, I'll stick them in A tier. I think that, like, if your opponent doesn't have any monsters, I think that they're actually still decent. They can just be decent. Oh, look, I have Gutrippas twice. That's unfortunate. Boo earns. Ardboys S tier? I don't think I can put them S tier. I don't think I can put them S tier because I don't think that they're auto includes. I think I put them in like A tier because you can definitely play a big Wagh list where you're not running Ardboys. Where you're running like your minimum battle line requirement. So does that mean that brutes are S tier because you're definitely going to include at least 1 unit of brutes? No. I think that Ardboys and brutes are just going to be both A tier. They're solid. You're not necessarily going to automatically see them in every list, but when you do, you're not surprised. Here's another good A tier unit. We're going to go with Ragers. Ragers are going to be an A tier unit because they're, like I said, they're just really strong. They're really good, and they hit really hard. They fit their role really well. They're cheap. You're going to have 200 points for a reinforced unit of them. They're going to run in charge with that +1 to charge from Big Wagh, and when they get +1/+1 with your Big Wagh points, they absolutely slap. they go to 2s and 2s with 2 rend and 2 damage, and if you throw Violent Fury on top of them, and they're a counterpunch unit, right? They're going to hang out with your castle, and then if something comes close, you know, these guys are going to be the ones that come out from behind, run in charge, and they're going to make your day a lot more sloppy than you originally intended. Last but not least, we have the 2, I'm not sure if they're Warcry or Underworlds or whatever, but we have Morgoth's, nope, what are they called? Iron Skull's Boys, which is the Ardboy variant, and Morgoth's Crushes, which is the Brute variant. I do believe, if I remember correctly, that both of them are 80 points each. Yep, they're both 80 points each, with the Ardboy version having 4 models and the Brute version having 3 models. And I don't know, are they both F tier? I'm kind of feeling like they're both F tier. And the reason is, I think for their point value, I think you just go with Hobgrots every time in Big Wagh. Do you go with Hobgrots every time like you have 80 points left over? It's like, Hobgrots aren't orcs, but they are 10 feet on objectives, and they do string out nice and far to make a line. So, I don't know, I can't personally see running either one ever. I don't even own them. I guess I don't own these 2. We'll see if they're in 4th. If they're in 4th, I'll pick them up, but I'm just for completionist's sake. But I think I have every other model on this list. Yup, I do. Anyway, tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Come hang out in Discord and tell me what you think. Tell me, did I get something wrong? Is there something here that you disagree with? And remember, you have to use my own metrics, right, for ranking them. Otherwise, we're not speaking the same language. But yeah, let me know what you think. And until then, like, subscribe, Wagh.